Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Board of Directors agenda meeting for March 14, 2023. This is our opportunity to review the agenda for our formal board meeting that will be held on March 21st, 2023. As we know, we have on the agenda today two presentations. We'll start first with Central Arkansas Water. I believe this presentation is going to be pretty brief because we know the MHA will probably be brief, but won't be as brief as Central Arkansas Water.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Good afternoon, Mayor.
Did you say quick?
Quick, yeah.
Great.
Brief and quick. So good afternoon, Mayor, City Directors. On behalf of Central Arkansas Water, I am pleased to update you tonight about the expansion of the state's assistance program for water and wastewater bills. So I've talked to you guys before about this program. Before it was for low-income eligible households, and it was only for past due amounts. So if you had a past due amount owed and were at risk of being shut off, they were doing crisis benefits for up to $2,000 to make you right on your water and wastewater portions of the bill. That program, the crisis benefit portion, is still ongoing. However, they have now expanded the program where essentially low-income households can get up to a year of free water and wastewater paid. So we really want your help in getting the news out to any of your constituents who might benefit from this. So again, now it's for anybody who is low-income eligible, so anyone who is on SNAP, SSI, LIHEAP, which is the Energy Assistance Program, or TAMP. They automatically qualify, as well as if you otherwise qualify for the income eligibility, you can get up to $2,000 as a credit on your bill. The goal of the state, they're going to do this based on a formula, but is to pay for a year's worth of your water and wastewater bill. So CEW just learned about this. We're trying to do everything we can to outreach about it. We're going to contact customers. Thanks to the mayor is going to join us on Thursday for our press conference. We're going to make flyers because I know Ms. Jones is going to ask me if I have any, and we're also going to translate those flyers into Spanish, and I'm going to get them to Director Adcock and the rest of you guys to help put them at community centers. So just wanted to update you on that. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
No question, Chester. Just want to thank you for this service and a lot of clarity on the email we got about the press event. So thank you guys for reaching out to those who need it the most. And I think that's been the issue we've talked about quite often with your upcoming projects. So just want to thank you guys for working with the mayor and city leaders to make this funding available for a group of people who know will need it and deserve it. So thank you for you guys doing this, and thank you for being here to present this to us tonight.
Thank you, Director Richardson.
Thank you, Chelsea. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Everyone will now turn to the presentation of the Metropolitan Housing Alliance. They'll be giving a brief update on Big Country Chateau from their perspective. Madam Chair, Lita Anthony.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board, City Attorney, City Manager. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to come before you. It is the policy of the MHA board that in matters of this type, that the board takes it on the responsibility of answering questions as the final authority, as the entity that is responsible for the viability of the agency, and as that entity that is responsible for the fiduciary health of the entity. I'm Lita Anthony, and I am president of the Central Arkansas Housing Corporation, but I also serve as a commissioner for Metropolitan Housing. With me this afternoon is the chairman of the board for MHA, Kenyon Lowe, and also the vice chairman of MHA board, Lee Lindsay. All three of us are what you call certified board members. That is, we have our credentials. We are educated and certified in all the programs of the Housing Authority. So while we don't run the day-to-day operation, we do give oversight to the programs and the policies. In fact, we create the policies of the agency. So when the issue and the comments are constantly being made that we're being non-cooperative with this matter, we came to see what that means. What is it that MHA staff is not doing that this body, and especially the city manager, thinks that we should be doing? And to clear up what the role of the Housing Authority is and its restrictions per HUD in our community. So I'm asking the question to you, the members of the board, what is it that you think we should be doing in this matter that we're not already doing?
Thank you, Ms. Anthony. I believe you're now complete with your presentation. We'll take some questions from members of the board, if any.
Mayor, I'm still logging in, but so I hadn't had a chance to raise my hand, but I would like to be in the queue if
You're,
you want.
right, Director Phillips.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Anthony. Good to see you again, and the members of MHA for being here, and I apologize for being late and getting myself together. I guess I'll start and try to be responsive to your question. Maybe some other members wanted you here, but I know I made it public last week to ask you guys to come here. So I'll take the lead, at least initially. And my general question is, I just want to make sure we understand, and more importantly, the citizens, residents of the city, and those particularly affected at Big Country Chateau, understand what MHA's role is in this process. Because I think what happens a lot of times is when things don't work out, they blame the city of Little Rock. Good, for whatever reason, right? And I think I want to clarify that, one, but more importantly, I want to make sure that they understand that who are the right people to contact at the right time. So I'm really kind of ignorant to the role that MHA plays in this situation. So that's one reason why I requested it. So if we can start there, I would appreciate it.
Our role doesn't change. We're the individuals who deal with the issues of vouchers. And I think there's a misnomer here as to MHA having units that they can just place people in, or the fact that we pass out vouchers like it's bubble gum. We do not. MHA has only 21 units, which we call NSP2s, and they are all filled except 3 that are going through rehab. They also are part owners in the 40 units that makes up Legacy Senior Homes. So that's the end of any units that MHA might have. As far as vouchers are concerned, vouchers, the appropriation that funds vouchers comes from the United States Congress, and vouchers are not given out unless there is funding for those vouchers. The city of Little Rock has been going through a housing crisis now for almost 10 years, where the local stock of houses and now the local stock of landlords is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Of the 96 emergency vouchers that we shared with the city of Little Rock through its CATCH program, we still are aware we've got some 50 folks out with vouchers who are still looking for housing. That's how limited housing is concerned. So this is not a per se MHA fix it. This is a situation where the city and all parties need to be working together to create new solutions and prevention so this doesn't continue to happen. Also, while Big Country is the one that's in the news, it's certainly not the only apartment complex that has residents going through this process. So that creates what we call a waiting list for individuals who are trying to obtain vouchers or public housing opportunities from MHA.
Thank you for that, and I think I follow. One thing that came up last week was a question as it relates to inspectors and some of the residents from Big Country Chateau was here, and they talked about different inspectors, and I was trying to make sure we have an understanding. Does MHA have inspectors that go to these different apartment complexes when there are issues like we've seen at Big Country Chateau?
If in fact they are vouchered.
Okay.
We are required by HUD standards to go in and inspect any apartment before an individual is allowed to inhabit. Now, the other inspection is, of course, done through your code enforcement, which has been limited. Last I looked, you only had 5 inspectors for the growing population of apartments that we see all around our landscape, which could also be a problem.
Okay, and I don't want to monopolize the microphone, so if my other colleagues have questions, I definitely yield to them. And you mentioned you only do the vouchers if there are Section 8 clients, correct?
Yes.
And how
And
many?
we have also emergency vouchers, which is fed through Catch. And those vouchers are individuals where we go out and inspect.
Okay, and how many vouchers or Section 8 folks are housed at Big Country Chateau?
We had 24.
Okay,
We immediately were able to move the first 10. We're now going back in to remove give vouchers to the second 14.
okay. And what's the process? And again, forgive me, Ms. Anthony, because I'm really just ignorant. I'm trying to get information, and maybe others are benefiting from this. But what's the process for someone to get on that voucher list if they need to, if they are a Section 8 recipient?
If they're on the Section 8 voucher, what we do is reissue the voucher in a case like Big Country to afford them an opportunity to move away from where they are to somewhere else. And our folk have been out, letters have gone out, but in this case, you got people who are just afraid to move. And so you got people who are going to stay with the building until the building has a resolution.
And lastly, and I'll pass the microphone, Mayor, you mentioned at the beginning that there's a low housing stock in Little Rock, and I agree with you, and I know we need to do more to make affordable housing throughout the city. How many units, or I guess units is the right word, does MHA have throughout the city?
Again, they only have the 21 NSP2s and 20 of the 40 that is at senior homes at Legacy.
Okay, and that's why I got confused. I don't know what an NSB2 is. What is that?
Those duplexes were built as a part of a stabilization program. They're duplexes that are primarily along Woodrow, they're along Johnson Street, Alice, peppered primarily in those areas.
And all your units occupied?
All but 3 that are going through rehab.
Okay. Understood. Mayor, I'll pass the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. Director
Thank you, Ms. Anthony.
Not a problem.
Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. Lita and I have a long-standing history. We don't want to say how many years we've known
No.
each other. It's too many. I appreciate you coming today and helping us to understand the situation as it is today. And Director Phillips asked a number of my questions that I had. I actually thought that you had more units at Big Country Chateau than what is stated here of 24 units. I thought maybe you had more than that. And it sounds like of the 24 units that you have under your control, that either they're placed or you're working on placing those folks in a situation. Are any of those 24 units, are those folks, are they any of the ones that don't want to leave?
Yes, they are. And when we say units, these are units that people live in who
Right.
have a voucher. So the physical unit is not ours. The voucher is. So yes, we've got some folks there who have not chosen to leave.
Okay, so of the 14 vouchers that you have in Big Country Chateau, how many of those people are the ones that don't want to leave? That may not be a fair question for you, but I'm just curious about that.
Well, we've sent them back out, so we're waiting for them to tell us if they're going to leave or not. We don't remove to leave them without any options, but we will continue to urge their moving and help them try to find somewhere else to move to.
Okay. The other question I have, and Director Phillips touched on it a little bit, and that's the code enforcement question. And it was my understanding that if it's your unit, which you're now saying is voucher, that you're responsible for the code enforcement, identifying those and getting those rectified. Is that a true statement or not?
We are responsible for an annual inspection, and we are responsible for a move-in inspection. And yes, if the tenant complains to us that the landlord is not doing something, then that inspector will go back out, record that, send it to the Section 8 department, and many folk have been kicked off the roll. Landlords have been kicked off the rolls because they did not keep up with keeping up their property. But I think there's something that you miss here.
Okay.
And that's the human capital side. People are afraid to move because they are more aware than most of the people in this room of the fact that there's no place to move to. They have a wonderful grapevine. It's called word of mouth.
Right.
And they talk to each other in some of the homeless places where they get their meals, and they tell each other of their experiences. And again, Big Country is just the one in the news, but it certainly is not the only apartment complex that needs attention.
Yeah, I understand that. Of the 96 emergency vouchers, how many of those, first of all, the 96 emergency vouchers, how are those handed out, and what's the length of time that those vouchers will remain with the individuals?
We are working with Tracy Shine through the Housing and Neighborhoods Organization with those vouchers. Some of them have been taken from folk, and Tracy, help me if I'm speaking out of turn, to move them to other people. But when we look at the 96 vouchers, as we compared our notes, there's about 53 people or 53 vouchers out there that have not been utilized because people are on the street looking for a landlord that will accept that voucher.
Okay, so that does not relate to units. That just relates to that there's money for them to get a home to live in. Okay.
And there was a great transition during COVID. People found out that they could get more money for their rental houses, and they sold them, getting completely out of the rental possibility because in a lot of cases, the rental properties was eating up their retirement as they went in to fix up every time somebody moved out. So we have been in a situation of trying to recruit more landlords to be on the roll, so to give people a better opportunity to use their vouchers.
Okay. That's cleared up some things for me, so thank you again for coming.
Director Richardson?
Thank you, Mayor. Leader, thank you for being here, and you and I have quite a history as well. May not be as long as yours and Director Warwick.
They're gonna figure out I'm old here in a minute.
Well, I'm not saying that. She may be, and you may be, but I'm not. Two questions. One, you made reference to NSP 2 funding. After the recession in 2008, we had NSP 2 and NSP 1 funding, correct? One was for basically rehabilitating, redeveloping, rehabbing homes, and other was for new homes. Am I correct?
Yes.
And do we still have NSP 2 funding? I know we don't have NSP 1 funding anymore. National Stabilization Program funding, I think is what it was called.
We have NSP 2 funding via property that was in SP2 that we can go in and rebuild in SP2.
Okay, and if I think, a lot of times we all hear things differently. If I think I heard you correctly, I think I heard you say that the city lacks the infrastructure for the housing of people who may need housing, and we may have funding to put them in homes. And we certainly have an ungodly amount of homes on our UV list, unsafe and vacant list, and we hadn't figured out a way, I think in partnership with you guys, to kind of develop some kind of comprehensive affordable housing, some comprehensive strategy to get people into homes that are livable and homes that are equipped enough to raise healthy children, youth, and families. Is that a correct assumption on my part?
We love partnerships, but there's also a prevention measure here that I think the city board misses. We have talked about housing and the condition of housing and what it needs ever since the mayor was probably shooting marbles. So we can't put, we have to look at where we've been with this issue. We've talked about warranty of habitability, which makes those landlords and those investors responsible so
agree.
things like Big Country doesn't happen.
I agree.
We have talked about ordinances that strengthen the language and the responsibility of landlords so that Big Country doesn't happen. The problem is that if you haven't driven our landscaping in a while, if this board doesn't do something, Big Country is just the tip of the iceberg. Because in 10 years, when we look at where these apartment buildings have been built, we're going to have one hot mess in Little Rock. If there's nothing that holds landlords and investors responsible for the upkeep of their property. This is not just relegated. We can walk a couple of blocks over and find Big Country problem right downtown. And anybody want to doubt it? My car's outside, got a tank of gas, let's ride. It's everywhere in this city because there's no language in, Section 8 Code of Housing that the city deals with that is strong enough to make landlords and investors accountable for what they build and for what we pay more for less. And this is what causes the problem. This is why the folks at Big Country don't want to leave. That's what they know.
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the human capital part is the part that we don't focus enough on, and I think that's probably why some of the social ills that we see in certain parts of our city are located in certain parts of our city because of what we're talking about here right now. I think even from an aesthetic standpoint, and I'm not generalizing all rent-occupied homeowners, but I grew up in rent-occupied homes, and I think that's why some of our parts of our city look the way they look, because I guarantee you, not a single solitary person in this room will raise a hand and say they got an oil change on a rental car. They don't own it. They have no investment, no connection to it. So I think that's part of why we're seeing this disconnect. And I think we got to figure out a way. And I hear what you're saying, we up here got to figure out a way to resolve this issue, not just with Big Country, but on a long-term basis. Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. We got a lot of many big countries, unfortunately, in our city. And we have to pay attention to them, not at the very last minute, but at the minute it's brought to our attention, and proactively address this situation. So thank you for being here, and I appreciate what you said.
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. And Ms. Anthony, I want to kind of follow up on a couple of things I forgot to mention. Do you know, or can you give us the information, the difference on the number of units that are available as opposed to the number of people on the list? How big is that gap? Do you know?
Hundreds.
Hundreds?
Hundreds.
And I understand that you say MHA only has a few units, but I thought, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I thought MHA or some entity controlled by MHA had more apartment complexes. Am I understanding that correctly?
No. Central Arkansas Housing Corporation is its own entity. And even among us, we are limited. When I checked the list this morning before leaving the grounds at Madison, we had 27 units, but a list of several hundred who are waiting for those 27 units. With a voucher, a person gets an opportunity to go and look. They still have to be vetted before they can move into a unit. There are HUD rules and guidelines that restricts a lot of the folk that we're talking about from moving into those units. And it's the same process for a landlord, looking at, are there any evictions on your record? Do you owe any utility bills? Your credit score. All of those things are looked at when people are looking for someplace to live. And as I talked to you, Director Phillips, a couple of weeks ago, one of the advertisements was, a vacant lot downtown is an opportunity for a business. A vacant lot in the community is a housing opportunity. So when we begin to focus from downtown to our community, we're going to resolve some of these problems.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's going to lead me to my next point. But before I leave there, just to be clear, there is an opportunity for people who are voucher recipients to apply for the units that are maintained or operated by CAHC. Am I understanding that correctly?
No, sir, there really isn't, because
Okay.
those vouchers, those applications are timed in. And as I said earlier, Big Country is the entity that's making the news. There are people out there with the same issue as Big Country who are in line applying for those same units.
And that's where I want to end, but I just want to make sure I'm clear, because apparently I wasn't. So the people with vouchers cannot apply for Madison or the other units that are owned by CAHC?
They can apply, but they go on to a waiting list.
And I understand the waiting list, I get that, but there is an opportunity. There may be people in front of them that may not qualify, but they do have the opportunity to apply for these units that are operated by the separate entity.
Yes, and they are. They are already applying.
Okay.
And they are on our waiting list.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. And the last thing is where I want to end, but you kind of already went there, but I was going to ask you, what can we do from your point of view to make sure that what happened to the folks at Big Country don't happen to the folks at apartment building X, Y, and Z? And if I understood you correctly, Ms. Anthony, you think we need to have some tougher ordinances as it relates to the apartment owners and the landlords. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that's part of it. But we could increase the inspectors on our code enforcement. And again, the last time I looked, there were only 5 inspectors for the entire city of Little Rock. And that was a conversation back several years ago that we had with City Manager Bruce Moore when we were talking about healthy housing and the trauma that our children go through when the housing is not good housing. And we were talking that Little Rock had grown at that time more than 30,000 apartment units, but we had not increased the inspectors in code enforcement. So, and we know that one visit is not all they do. They go out, they inspect, they find the problem, and then the individual is given time to correct it, which means there's a lengthy process even for that inspector.
Understood. And MHA, you have your own inspectors who do the same thing for the units that y'all own and maintain?
Yes, sir.
Does CAHC have separate inspectors for those units that entity owns?
We have separate inspectors and we have HUD inspectors. They do what we call a REACT, which is much more penetrating than anything the city or any other inspector is going to do.
Understood, understood. Thank you, Ms. Anthony. And Mayor, I would just end, I guess it's addressed to our city attorney. Tom, if you would look at some options for us, because Ms. Anthony and others have mentioned, and I know I've mentioned this too, doing something to protect our tenants more. I know Arkansas state law is pretty restrictive as it relates to landlord-tenant law, but whatever we can do in the city to prevent what happened at Big Country from happening to another apartment complex. I want to make sure that we understand what those options are. I talked to Director Lewis. She mentioned maybe we, mandate inspections so we can catch things that happen at Big Country earlier at other apartments. There may be some habitability things that are short of a warranty of habitability that we can enforce on landlords to protect these folks so they don't end up in this situation. So if you can look at that or have your team look at that and kind of report back to us with some options, I would appreciate it.
One other thing, Attorney Carpenter, back during one of the several times that the city has been involved with Big Country, Judge Gray issued a letter of implied warranty of habitability in Little Rock due to the fact that we do have code enforcement. And I think I still have a copy of that letter if you can't find it. The other thing that we'd like to recommend, and this comes on the heels of a conversation I had with Director Adcock, as she talked about how expensive apartments are, as she was trying to help some residents. One bedroom is $1,800 to $2,000. It's a little bit out of the range for people looking for affordable housing. Our chairman has advocated several years for a rent control board that would also take in the responsibility of making sure that the inspections and the landlords would be held to that higher standard of making sure that these apartments are livable. So that's one of the other recommendations, is that you might look into a rent control board that keeps people from gouging our folk, because we have more than our share of folk who need affordable housing.
That's all I had, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Anthony, and thanks to the member of MHA for being here today.
Director Adcock and then Director.
Thank you, Ms. Anthony, for being here. In the last 30 days, I've been made aware of 2 other apartment complexes that's just one step behind Big Country. I've made the city aware of that, but there are very, very many more, as you and I both know. On the next voucher coming up to get an apartment, can you tell me how long that person has waited?
Oh my, that would be hard for me to say. I would have to basically look at MHA to see how long. For us, the ones that have come up, it could be, we got people moving in all the time. Because since our taking over our property, I'm gonna brag a little bit, we do a better job of keeping the property up and making sure they're safe and clean. And that issue of policing, security is much better. We have been able, because we were able to secure and hire individuals who are skilled and certified in their different areas, which means we're not spending the money on outside vendors. We're able to turn over property just a little bit faster than most and do a better job. So I would think that it can be anywhere from, depending on who it is, and please keep in mind, all of our properties are market, they're mixed properties. So some of the units are market rate, some of them are tax credit, some of them are public housing. So it just depends on the size of the unit and how bad the last person left it, as to how soon a new tenant can get into it.
Well, I know that some of the people I've worked with have waited months to get into housing. It's even worse for people with large families. I remember calling you about one woman I think had 12 children, and I don't think we ever got her into housing. And we was calling North Little Rock and every place else. So, it is a big problem, and it's just going to get to be a bigger problem. And sometime we're going to have to address that problem, because we're getting more and more families that are homeless, and we can't build enough homeless villages to make families have a place to live. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Mayor, and let me also thank you, Ms. Anthony, for being here. to make this presentation and the other members of the commission for being here. Let me make sure I understand the two different entities, Metropolitan Housing Authority and Central Arkansas Housing Corporation.
Yes, sir.
Paris Towers, Cumberland Towers, Sunset Terrace, Ives Walk, Madison Heights, who manages those?
The people who manage the towers right now is Gorman Company. At some point, they will come back to the possession of CAHC. Madison Heights, they will manage Sunset. Gorman, the developer that we partnered with one of HUD's programs called RAD, which is Rental Assistance Demonstration, which allows us to go in and completely rehab apartments. And if you hadn't been by Sunset to see what's going on the side of that hill, you should go. It's amazing what's taking place there.
Looks good.
Porches, something that those folks hadn't had. A whole lot more space, living rooms, real formal places where our children can sit down at the table. So it's a $26 million project that, yes, CAHC, MHA, and Gorman Company, and a couple of other investors are making that happen. But to date, the towers are managed by Gorman and Company. Madison Heights, Homes at Granite Mountain, Legacy is managed by CAHC.
Okay, thank you. I did want to give you a chance to brag about what's going on with, the rehabbing of properties. So it's a situation where it went from public housing to the private sector, but you're saying it's coming back to housing. How does that work again now?
Now, they still will be on vouchers at that property, even though, and it's, you being a banker and all, it still is complicated, how these deals come into being. But it's how HUD has set it up to allow us to go in and actually reinvest in the property and just make an amazing change from where people used to live to where they can live. Now, the company will stay on the property as a part of the tax credit portion of the deal. And then at some point, maybe 3 years or 5 years, even though they're still in the deal, the management will change.
Okay. So you don't have any overly concern about the loss of public housing to go to different ownership because you feel it's still providing housing for people that will have vouchers?
Well, public housing is still a HUD program. Mm-hmm. And if we choose to invest in it, yes, that's part of our plan in looking at the properties on 12th Street, the properties out in Southwest Little Rock. There will be some opportunities for affordable housing. But I will say to you what I say to most people, everybody ain't trying to live in an apartment. Part of our children's problem is that they have nowhere to play. And those concrete reservations that we continue to see coming up all over our properties and landscaping is not what everybody wants to live in. Somebody wants to live in a yard. We're living with a yard where their kids can know their neighbors. And that's what CAHC is about, is beginning to build houses where there are yards and neighbors. Part of our crime is because nobody is sitting on the porch anymore to make our kids and our communities safe.
Thank you. I just want to end by saying I want to thank you for at least, see the effort to try to produce some housing, try to produce affordable housing. So it's just not managing units. You're also out here trying to build housing that's affordable. So I think you need to be complimented on that.
Well, with great thanks to the Mayor, Kevin Howard, for twisting our arms and following us around town to see what we're buying and keeping that out in front of us. We want to make sure you know that there are members of the city who have their finger on the pulse.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Director Lewis.
All right, just really quick, I just want to publicly thank you and MHA and everyone involved. I know we've been behind the scenes working on this, so I just want to say it in front of everyone that we do appreciate you all.
Thank you. And again, we couldn't do this all by ourselves. MHA welcomes any opportunity. Director Adcock has come over and helped us out a couple of times. We're still waiting on our liaison, Director Richardson, to assist us. So we borrowed people from this board from time to time. So we do appreciate the relationship, but we just wanted to clear up that we are, in fact, doing all we can in this matter.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and the entire MHA board who are with us today. We appreciate you. Members of the board, we'll now transition to the additions. We have one modification for today's agenda. It'll be on next week, which is item M1, which is an ordinance to authorize the issuance of a water reclamation system revenue bond, Series 2023, for the purpose of restructuring the city sewer revenue bonds, Series 2013 and Series 2016, and water reclamation system bonds, Series 2018 and Series 2019, providing for the payment of the principal and interest on the bond and prescribing other matters relating thereto. In a nutshell, we'll be saving some money. Is that right, Mr. Rhoda? That's correct. All right. Board members, are there any questions as it relates to the consent agenda? Any questions as it relates to the consent agenda? Any questions as it relates to the consent agenda? Any questions as it relates to the consent agenda? We'll now transition to planning items 12 and 13. Director Wyrick.
Mayor, item 13 is in Ward 2 and not Ward 7. That's my only comment or question about it.
Yes, ma'am. We'll make sure that that is changed to Director Richardson's ward.
Right.
Love to see that unity there, Director Wyrick.
Thank you.
All right. Director Adcock, see your hand.
Yes, I would like item 13 separate.
You would like that separate? Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Item 14, any questions on Director, is your hand still up, Director Wyrick?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll take it down.
Any question, item 14? Seeing none, we'll now ask Dana Doucette to please come to do the PIT report. Shep, make sure you make the right bracket. All right. Talking about university.
Good afternoon, Mayor, and to the Board of Directors and to my colleagues. So you should have received a couple of weeks ago a copy of the Help Yourself. That was the one that was from last year, actually. And in between the time that I was supposed to give this report to now, they actually have updated it to this one. And so you all have a copy of this here. This is the 2023 version of it. And if you look at the very middle of it, you will see that we work and have been working along with the publisher of this. And you'll see that in the very middle of it, it has a copy of who we are and what we do that kind of signifies how we work with them. In addition to what we normally have done with this, and we worked with them for the past couple of years to really assist with this process. If you look at the back pages of it, if you turn to the very back and look at the back cover as well as turn to the inside back covers, This year, there's an index of resource providers, and we're really excited about that because it continues to make this community asset directory even more useful, because it gives the name, if you're really looking pretty quickly to see who's here and where they're located with their information. In addition to this, there is a digital copy of it, and so I will try to make sure that everybody here has a digital copy of it, because it can also be sent out to different resource providers and different people in the community that definitely are beginning to use it. We make sure that this community asset resource directory gets in the hands of as many people as possible. And so I say that if you have a business or some place where you think that the physical copy should be located, let us know, and we'll make sure that they have those. This is a great resource that we use when it comes to our street team and some of the other people in the community to use when they're trying to connect the people that we come in contact with to resources in general. But then in addition to this, when we were asked by the board to look at the community asset map, we took stock in this and realized that there were some things in this that we felt were missing. And so that's why you should have also received the printed copies that were typed, because we are working to merge the things that we found when we started looking at it through a different lens to be able to put them into next year's version. We had already started putting together this year's resource directory, so we weren't able to put the information that was in the printed copy, into the newspaper. But we'll be working on that going forward, because these were the things that we also use ourselves, which is why we didn't really realize that they weren't in the resource directory, because we knew about them, if that makes any sense. And so we were using them, and it wasn't until we actually compared the two to realize that there were a few things missing. And so that's simple as, like, for example, the city services. We'd like to make sure that all of the community centers are in there. And the schools, that's something that could be in there as well. So we'll be working to make sure that that information gets into the resource directory as we continue to grow. Then I also tried to make sure that everyone had a copy of our newest brochure. There are some additional things that we have started working on that the board has approved. For example, you had heard about our community violence reduction programs. That's a new project that we've started. Our neighborhood safety programs, that's a new project that we've started. And we just recently closed an RFP for community innovation projects. We're in the review process now, and we'll be coming to you with some new services that we'll be offering our residents here shortly. So the growth of our department has been really exciting. I think you'll continue to see improvements as we talk about the assets that we offer the community as a city. And with that, I'm open for any questions that anyone may have about the community assets that we have in the city of Little Rock.
Thank you, Director Doucette. Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Dana, thank you for your presentation. Mayor, just a quick couple of questions that may be holding the mirror up to us for questions that we may need to be able to look at in terms of providing the assistance that I think Dana needs in her department. Currently, who's doing technical assistance and evaluations for these programs?
So we have two people right now. One is Amber Garrett. She does the monitoring for the programs.
All the programs?
All of the programs. That is just a little bit shared this year with the grants department, and only because, if you remember, the community violence reduction projects were actually through the ARPA grants, and so the grants department handles those contracts. But the rest of them are done by Amber Garrett. All of the programs, yes. And then our technical assistance and our coaching is done by Jerry Stewart. And again, she does handle all of the programs that need assistance.
Even the street team, the crisis intervention that we're doing in the community, who does that training and technical assistance?
The training for the training technical assistants, I'd say is shared between Michael Sanders, who's the assistant director, and Wayne Burt, who is the supervisor for them.
And who are we relying on to give us the demographic data to tell us what kind of program needs to go in what part of the city? We don't have an intermediary, correct?
We do not have an intermediary. We recently hired a data coordinator, and if you might remember earlier this year, the board approved the use of Apricot, where we're starting now to start gathering a more robust information on our demographic information and all of the other types of data that we know we need to make those type of decisions.
Well, Mayor, I appreciate the work that Dana and her staff does, and I'm not sure they have quite enough staffing to carry it out. Dean, going back to when you guys first conceptualized PIT, it was a group effort, and I think it was designed in a way to make sure we put money out in the community where these problems were happening to programs who didn't necessarily have the capacity to get state funding or any other funding sources. And I think in my mind, we've done a 180-degree turn with this master plan. Are we still working on the master plan?
When you say working on it, you mean using it or working on a new one?
Have we completed the master plan? Maybe a more appropriate question. Because the whole notion of master plan, it's run away some of our longest service providers. They're at the part of it, if I understand it correctly, is based on adapting some core state standards, which had they been working for those programs funded by the state, there never would have been a need for PIT. And that master plan didn't come from the service providers or the community receiving the services or anybody from the community. That master plan requests, or I'm not going to say request, that master plan demand came from a sitting colleague who, in my opinion, wasn't necessarily concerned or interested in what was going on because that person didn't know what was going on, but was more concerned because programs that that person supported and wanted to have fund didn't get funding because there's a whole host of things you have to go through in terms of the RFQs and RFPs. And right now, are we utilizing anybody from the community to help develop these RFPs and RFQs? Don't take my comments as being critical of you or your department or even the programs that we're funding. We're funding programs right now that 20 years ago, we wouldn't have been funding them because we were funding programs that were reaching out to young people who had been banned from our community centers, who had been banned from Boys and Girls Club, who had been kicked out of school. We had school-based case managers who dealt with those who were most likely to get kicked out of school, so we can make that coordination in terms of what happened at a school and what could potentially happen in a certain part of our city. I mean, we've had two huge fights in the last couple of weeks, one at Central and one was at Hall, that I think may have some community implications if we're not prepared or equipped well enough to deal with those on a first-hand basis. So I think that to that extent, Mayor, even our coordination with the police department, we don't have that anymore. We used to have I think we call it Bridging the Gap basketball series, where we had gang members play basketball games against police officers. We had Rainbow Love that was funded by the Civitan Club, bowling tournament where we had police officers interact with young people at those programs. I'm not sure we're having that same kind of cross collaboration where we have this seamless stream of comprehensive services. I mean, I got a call before you retired, Mayor, at about 10 o'clock from Major Ken Temple. And I see his number pop up on Thursday night. I'm like, oh God, I don't want to answer this phone. And he was telling me that he had just ran into a young man who remembered him from back in 1993, 94, and said his interaction with him is why he didn't go to jail and why he's alive now and why he sees the positivity, the positive things in his life and the positive things that can happen for him if he does the right thing. And he equated that to the major coming to to Rainbow of Love and Bridging the Gap and coming to this program, then we're having young people go interact with the police department on different levels other than suspect law enforcement. I mean, do we even have that anymore? Any kind of cross collaboration with our police department?
I can't answer that I won't say it's seamless, but we do have it. For example, if you do get a chance to look back at the brochure, you'll see in there that we do fund the Little Rock OK program and the Little Rock GEMS program, which is through the police department. So that is definitely where we have cross collaboration. We also work with Parks and Recreation for some of the, especially like the summer playground programs that they have. So we do some cross collaboration there. We also do have in school, we have several school-based staff, and we have 4 of those in different schools. So we're working now on a constant basis with the Little Rock School District to work with them. I do know that the police department also recently has a youth advocate. I forget the proper name for those people, but I know that they have some youth advocate workers, and we're working with them to try to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I won't say that it's seamless, but we definitely have several examples of ways that we are working to close that gap. And I'd also like to throw a commercial out here for our summer youth employment opportunity, because that time is right now too, both for the youth to be able to apply for those positions if they're ages 16 to 21, as well as businesses who can serve as work sites. The time for that is right now. So again, we definitely are trying to work to have a greater outreach in the community.
And that's a perfect segue to my mayor, my last point that I'm going to make. I think on this issue, I think that, Dean, when we started this and the way it was conceptualized, we had, and let me throw Seamless back in there, we had a seamless stream of supports and services, Mayor, that was working on arresting, pun intended, the cradle to prison pipeline and replacing it, as you mentioned in your State of City address, replacing it with a cradle to college, cradle to career pipeline. We don't have that anymore, and I think that's going to be to our detriment. And when summer employment first started, we didn't have PIT. I think I see Dwight out there, and Dwight was working at one of our intermediaries. Summer employment was designed to engage those young folks who otherwise could not or would not get jobs. Those young people who didn't have employment would be the ones most likely to be breaking into our homes, breaking into our cars, and committing these acts of violence that we talk about time and time again. And I'm not knocking us expanding that, but I think we've moved away from that aspect of it. So I'm in favor of employing as many young people as we can, but I want us to get back to the center where we started and focus and address those who, had they not had employment, would be the ones breaking into our homes, breaking into our cars, committing the crimes that we're talking about, particularly now that public safety is back on the radar screen after the election. I just think that, Dana, you guys are doing a wonderful job, but I think, Dean, we've made a 180-degree turn. I think we're kind of back where we were when you guys talked about PIT and the need for PIT and a different approach to address violence other than law enforcement or bigger jails. And I just have to express that. And this is no criticism of you, Dana and Mike and Dwight. You guys are doing a wonderful job, but I think you guys are woefully understaffed. I don't think your reference to the seamless part with the GEMS and OK program, those are 2 programs. That's a lot different than having the police department interact with 20+ programs that are working with active gang members or those who most likely be involved in gangs and doing it on a regular basis, like we're doing with GEMS and the OK programs. I think are wonderful examples, but I think really, if we're talking about violence, which what we've talked about a lot lately, I think we need to be a little bit more proactive and less selective in when we're going to talk about it and how we're going to talk about it and who's going to have the microphone, who we're going to listen to and who we're not going to listen to. We've had people like Benny Johnson and other folks, Robert Webb and a number of folks, come down to our board members and tell us and challenge us on this. Long before it got to numbers where we're saying we're having record numbers or it's happening over here and it's happening downtown, when it was contained in certain parts, it didn't seem like it was a major effort for us to look at it, an objective assessment and evaluation on how we're spending our PIT money and how we're using it, and are we reaching the young people who it was designed for. It was a specific group of those folks who I think now, unfortunately, and as Lita said about the, people having homes and yards and bridges, a lot of other things that young people are growing up with in their communities are making them more likely to succumb to these social ills that are leading to some idiotic acts of violence in our community. So I just think we need to go back and look at how we started this and how we did this and figure out ways, Dean, I think, to get us back to that point, because we have the funding for it. We have the expertise for it. We have the knowledge and the know-how for it. We have the history of doing it. I just think it's in our best interest to figure out a way to get back to that, create those partnerships, and Dana, no disrespect, make it seamless, a seamless stream of supports and services where we have more partnerships and we're targeting. I'm really concerned about summer employment. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we need to be targeting those who, which is why we had the training program for summer employment through summer employability, which is why we had the mentors assigned to those folks. When we only had employed about 100 or 200 Mayor, we could assign mentors to kind of act as the go-between, the intermediary between the young person and the employer, so that they could have a positive experience on both sides. So with that said, Mayor, that's all I have to say on this. And Dana, thank you and you guys for doing the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Director Richardson. We do appreciate the expertise you bring to the table, and thank you, Dana, and the entire team, for what you guys are doing. Director Adcock, is your hand up?
Yes. Dana, I have a couple of things. Is any of this in Spanish?
No, and we did talk about that, though, so we'll be working with ODEI within this next year to try to include the Spanish version of it. So that is definitely on our radar.
Okay, if she could at least make a flyer that we could use now
Okay.
to pass out to the Latino community. Also, are these copies available for us?
Yes,
Okay, I would like to have 50 of them, please.
definitely. We'll make sure that you get those.
Okay, and also, the Southwest Police Precinct does have soccer games, and the soccer games will be in October. There'll be women's soccer and also men's soccer games. And it's about 4 or 5 years old now, and they have a wonderful group of people who participate in that. So I would like for you to check with Lieutenant Cole and make sure that we put it in all of your information so that people will know that's coming too.
Okay, we've got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana, and your entire team. We'll now transition to Ms. Emily Jordan Cox, who will give our legislative update.
It's for next week, Mayor.
Oh, it is for next week. All right, it is now 5:04. We do have some dinner prepared for members of the board. Director Adcock gave me some good advice to provide. She called it some happy dinner, Director Adcock.
Yes, ma'am, sure, Happy Meal.
Happy meal.
Oh, is it really McDonald's? We're having a Happy Meal?
No, it's not. No, Director Director Peck.
Well, Happy Meal.
To our constituents who love McDonald's, we didn't hear that.
Whoops.
We are having, actually, Vice Mayor, how about you announce what we're doing today? And actually, it was two ideas. It was Director Adcock, and then the selection was Vice Mayor Webb. No, Vice Mayor Webb.
Okay. Today, from 4 o'clock until 10 o'clock, the Hall High PTA is having a fundraiser at Raising Cane's, and Hall is a good school, and they need support, and I had planned to go there as soon as the meeting was over. And when the mayor and I talked earlier today, I asked if we could get our dinner from Raising Cane's and mentioned that we were there supporting the Hall High School PTA with 3 Hall graduates on the board. The mayor agreed to that, and they will get 15% of the money for their PTA.
That's fine. I told the mayor we couldn't go into this meeting with Raising Cane, but we needed happy food.
Well played, Director Adcock, well played.
Yes. All right, we'll adjourn. I guess it's not an adjournment, but our agenda meeting is now concluded. And so we'll have Raising Cane benefiting the Hall High School. And I think that's the only time I've ever called it the Hall High School, but I will.
It is the Hall High School.
No, but we'll have Raising Cane. Actually, I think we do have 3 Hall High graduates, Director Compuris, Director Peck, and Director Webb.
You
Okay.
never told me you had it.
Awesome. All right, this meeting is now concluded. We'll be back at 6 o'clock for our special call meeting. Thank you, everyone. kick started. Good evening. I want to take this time to welcome the Board of Directors to our special call meeting for March the 14th, 2023. And also welcome those that are watching online and streaming. We do appreciate you. Madam Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
Director Miller,
Here.
Director Richardson,
Here.
Director Peck,
Here.
Director Hines, Director Lewis,
Here.
Director Wyrick, Director Campiris, Director Phillips,
Present.
Director Adcock, Vice Mayor Webb, Mayor Scott.
Here. Now I'm going to ask Director Lewis to give invocation.
Please bow your heads. Lord, we just come to you, thanking you for this opportunity where we can come and do your business for the overall good of the city. Please let us, as much as possible, be on one accord and cordial and respectful in all things. We give you blessings, praises. Thank you. Amen.
Amen. May we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Vice Mayor, do we have a motion?
Yes, I would like to move that we go into executive session.
We have motions. There a second? Second. There's a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. We'll move into executive session. Members of the board, we're going to go to the back room. We're now coming back to session from our executive session for boards and commissions. We'll first start with our Civil Service Commission. Airport. We'll first start with the Airport Commission. I apologize. Dr. Harold Bedden, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it. We'll now go to the Civil Service Commission. Jeff Hildebrand, this is to help with new appointees coming on board. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Aubrey Nunley Jr., all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Pamela Abrams, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Bobby Forrest Jr., all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Mike Shepard, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. For the Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority, Prentice O'Gwen, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. For the Little Rock Housing Authority Board of Directors, Carrie Wright, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Thank you so much. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. $35 seconds.